People think the night shift at a Japanese convenience store is boring. They imagine sleepy streets, a few drunk salarymen buying instant noodles, maybe a couple of high school kids grabbing snacks after cram school. Fluorescent lights. Pop music on a loop. Nothing truly scary. I used to think so too. My name is Keita, and 3 years ago I was a university student working nights at a little 24-hour store on the edge of a dying shopping street. On one side of us was an empty lot that used to be a DVD rental shop. On the other side, separated by a narrow lane and a few stone lanterns, was a small shrine. The shrine was old, older than the train station, older than the town, older than the road that rattled with trucks every morning. No one I knew actually went there to pray. The only people who seemed to care about it were elementary school kids on dares and a white-haired priest I saw once a month, sweeping leaves with a broom that looked almost as ancient as he was. When I first started at the store, the manager gave me the usual orientation: how to work the register, when to restock the onigiri, what to do if a drunk customer started yelling. Then, as we stood together behind the counter looking out at the glass doors, he said something that didn't sound like company policy at all. "One more thing," he told me. "If a woman comes in alone between 2 and 3 in the morning, and she buys these 3 things," he held up 3 fingers. "Don't look outside while you're ringing her up. Keep your eyes on the register, take the money, give the receipt, bow, and don't look at the street or the doors until she's gone. Okay?" I laughed, because I thought he was joking. "What 3 things?" I asked. He didn't laugh back. "A bottle of barley tea," he said. "The big plastic one. A rice ball with salted salmon. And a cheap, red umbrella from the rack near the door. It's always those 3. If she comes, you'll know. Don't stare. Don't follow her with your eyes. Just let her leave." His voice was flat, but his hands were too tight on the counter. "Why?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head. "It's an old story," he said. "Forget it. Just remember the rule." Of course I didn't forget it. You don't forget that kind of thing. You tell yourself you will, you roll your eyes, but some part of you keeps the words like a charm in your pocket. For my first few weeks on night shift, nothing strange happened. The last train would come and go, the streets would empty, and the store would become a bright box floating alone in the dark. I wiped things that were already clean. I watched the security screens showing 4 identical angles of fluorescent silence. Sometimes I could hear the faint drumming from a late-night festival practice at the shrine, even when I couldn't see anyone outside. One rainy Tuesday, around 2:15 a.m., the automatic doors opened on their own. That in itself wasn't unusual. They were old and sometimes misread reflections as motion. Usually they slid open to greet nobody, waited a few seconds, then closed again with a soft sigh. But this time, the doors opened, and didn't close. They just stood there, glass panes parted, letting in a thin sheet of cold air and the smell of wet asphalt. I looked up from the magazine I was pretending to read. "Welcome," I called automatically. No one answered. From behind the counter, I could only see a slice of the sidewalk and the bottoms of the umbrella rack. Rain tapped on the pavement in the cone of light from the store. Beyond that, darkness. The parking space in front of the doors was empty. I stepped out from behind the counter, a little annoyed. Sometimes kids messed with the sensors, jumping in and out of range. I didn't see anyone. Then I noticed the umbrella rack. We had 8 cheap vinyl umbrellas in clear plastic tubes, lined up neatly by the doors. Now there were 7. One empty space gaped between 2 foggy handles, dripping quietly onto the floor. Something cold slid down my spine. I was still staring at the gap when I heard the soft thud of footsteps on the tile behind me, as if someone had just stepped over the threshold. "Welcome," I said again, turning. A woman stood in the aisle near the drinks cooler. She wore a plain, pale dress that might once have been white, but now seemed washed out, like something left too long in the sun. Her hair was long and wet, dripping onto the floor. Water had soaked down her sleeves and hem, but I couldn't hear any sound of her shoes on the tiles. Her face was ordinary. That was somehow the strangest part. She looked maybe in her late 20s, with a narrow jaw and tired eyes. Not beautiful, not grotesque. Just a woman who might sit next to you on the train and be forgotten the moment you stepped off. She slid the cooler door open with a quiet clack and took out a large bottle of barley tea. My heart tapped against my ribs. She walked slowly to the rice ball shelf and picked up an onigiri with salted salmon. My mouth felt dry. Finally, she turned toward the entrance again. As she passed the umbrella rack, she took one of the remaining cheap red umbrellas, even though water already dripped from the umbrella leaning against the doors outside. Barley tea. Salmon onigiri. Red umbrella. She carried them to the counter and set them down gently on the scanner pad. Up close, she smelled faintly of river water and old incense. I forced my shaking hand to move. I remembered my manager's warning. Don't look outside while you're ringing her up. I fixed my eyes on the register screen, on the numbers as they appeared. 152 yen. 125 yen. 400 yen. 477 yen, please, I said, voice a little too loud. The woman didn't answer. I saw, in the corner of my vision, her pale hand slide into the pocket of her damp dress. Don't look. I focused on the plastic bag in my hand, on the way its crinkling sounded too loud in the empty store. Another small, cool hand brushed my fingers as she placed coins on the tray. I counted them automatically. A 500 yen coin. I opened the drawer, put it in, and fished out her change. My eyes flicked up, just for a second, to meet hers. They were dark and very, very deep. Your change is 23. Something moved at the edge of my sight. Outside the glass doors, the street was no longer empty. In the reflection on the register, I saw shapes. At first I thought they were just the warped reflections of products on the shelves. But as I watched, they shifted, tall, thin silhouettes pressed against the glass from the outside, their faces indistinct, like people standing too close to a window on a dark night. Their hands were on the doors. I realized I'd turned my head too far. I was looking past the woman, toward the entrance. The doors that had opened for nobody were still gaping wide. The shadows on the glass were on the inside. Don't, whispered the woman. Her voice was soft and rough at the same time, like someone who hasn't spoken in a long while. I dragged my gaze back to her. She was staring at me with a kind of desperate intensity, as if my looking away had hurt her somehow. Don't see them, she said, just loud enough for me to hear. I swallowed. Why your change, I managed. 23 yen. She didn't take it. Instead, she reached out and closed my hand around the coins, as if I were the customer and she was the clerk. For the shrine, she murmured. Goosebumps bloomed on my arms. Please put it in the box. Before dawn. Her fingers were painfully cold. The air behind me felt crowded. I could feel, not hear, not see, but feel, the press of more bodies at my back, a damp, rotting breath on my neck that smelled like old river water and something sour, like flowers left too long in a vase. I didn't turn. The woman picked up her barley tea, the rice ball, and the red umbrella. Thank you, she said, bowing slightly. Then she walked toward the doors. The automatic sensors didn't react. She stepped through the still open gap in the glass and out into the rain. For a second, she was framed in the fluorescent light, small, wet, ordinary. Then she opened the umbrella. Its red vinyl bloomed like a wand in the night. She vanished into the dark. The pressure behind me eased. The store felt suddenly hollow, like a held breath released. The doors slid shut on their own. I stood there with my fist full of coins until my manager came in at 4 to start the morning shift. He took one look at my face and sighed. You saw outside, didn't you? Over instant coffee in the tiny break room, he told me the story. 20 years ago, before the konbini was built, there had been a row of old wooden houses along this road. No train station yet, no convenience stores, just a bus stop and the shrine. In one of those houses lived a young woman and her husband. He worked late shifts at a factory on the other side of the river, always coming home past midnight. On rainy nights, she would walk to the bus stop with a red umbrella to meet him, then they'd stop by the shrine to toss coins and pray that he'd one day get a day job. One stormy night, the bus never came. The river had risen quickly, swollen with mountain water. The old bridge collapsed under the weight of the first bus, dragging it into the dark current. There were no survivors. They found the bus the next morning, my manager said. But they never found her husband's body. Some people said the river took him straight to the sea. Others said he ended up in the mud of a rice field somewhere. And the woman? I asked. He looked at his coffee. She kept coming to the bus stop, he said. Every rainy night. Red umbrella, barley tea in her bag, his favorite salmon on a gyri. People told her to stop, but love makes ghosts of the living too. One particularly bad typhoon season, the river flooded again. The old houses along the bank were declared unsafe. The town decided to demolish that whole stretch and build something modern. Before they could, they found the woman's body in her empty house. She'd been dead for days. On the low table beside her futon were three things: a half-drunk bottle of barley tea, a salmon rice ball in its wrapper, and an old red umbrella. She never got to see the new bridge, my manager said. She never saw the convenience store either. But some people say she kept her ritual. He stared at the vending machine humming in the corner of the break room. The first clerk who worked nights here, he went on, said that on the anniversary of the flood, a woman came in at 2:30, bought those three things, and vanished. He thought it was just a creepy coincidence. Then the doors wouldn't close. He looked outside and saw. He trailed off. Saw what? I whispered, even though I already knew part of the answer. Everyone who didn't follow the rule described it differently, my manager said. Some saw rows of people standing on the road, dripping wet, staring inside. Some saw faces pressed against the glass, waiting to come in. Some said it was the river itself, black water right up against the doors, with pale shapes moving under it. He shrugged, but his shoulders were tight. Most of them quit after that. One, well, he started coming in every night at 2, staring at the doors, never ringing customers up at all. We had to let him go. My hand tightened around the coins in my pocket. For the shrine, I murmured. He nodded slowly. As long as the money goes to the shrine before dawn, she buys them time, he said. That's the story, anyway. Buys who time? He looked at me like he didn't want to say. The ones in the glass, he answered. The ones who were in the bus. The ones who should have crossed the bridge but didn't. We sat in silence a moment. Then my manager pushed his chair back and stood up. So, he said briskly, if you ever see her again, don't look outside, just take the money and bow. And if you've already seen them. He glanced at my pale face. Then you'd better hurry. I left the store as soon as the morning shift started. The world outside was gray and wet. The rain had thinned to a mist. The shrine next door looked small and out of place between the concrete buildings, its stone torii gate dark with moss. I walked toward it, my shoes splashing in puddles that reflected the bright blue of the store's sign. The shrine grounds were empty. The air smelled of wet earth and old wood. Paper streamers fluttered faintly from the rope around the trunk of an ancient tree. At the top of the short stone stairway was a wooden offering box with a slatted top. I stood there, breathing hard, as if I'd run a long way. My hand shook as I pulled the coins from my pocket. A 500 yen piece, warm from my palm. 23 yen and change, I whispered. For the shrine. I let the coins fall. They rattled loudly against the wood, then slid between the slats and vanished into the darkness below. For a moment, nothing happened. No flash of lightning, no voice from the heavens, no ghostly woman thanking me for the donation. I let out a trembling laugh at myself. Then I heard it. A faint sound, almost too soft to notice over the distant traffic, the rustle of vinyl being opened. I turned. Down at the edge of the shopping street, where the old bus stop used to be, a woman stood with her back to me. Her pale dress moved in the wet breeze. In one hand, she held a red umbrella. She didn't open it. She just stood there, looking down the road toward the new bridge, as if waiting for a bus that would never come. For a second, I thought she might turn around. Instead, she walked slowly away, her figure fading into the morning mist. When I went back to work that night, the automatic doors behaved themselves. No more phantom customers. No more crowds of shapes pressing against the glass. But every rainy season, during night shift, I keep a bottle of barley tea, a salmon on a gyri, and a cheap red umbrella behind the counter, just in case. And when the doors slide open for no one at 2:30 in the morning, and the sensors struggle to decide if something is there, I keep my eyes down and my hands ready. Because in this job, you learn that the scariest customers are the ones who still have somewhere to go. They just don't know how to cross over. So if you ever find yourself alone in a convenience store late at night, and the doors open with a soft hiss for nobody, don't look too closely at the glass. You might see pale faces on the surface. You might see the reflection of a woman with wet hair and a red umbrella standing behind you. And if she sets 3 items down on the counter in front of you, barley tea, a salmon rice ball, and an umbrella you didn't see her pick up, just ring her up, bow, and keep your eyes on the register. Let her walk back into the rain. Let her wait for the bus that never comes. And when she presses cold coins into your hand and whispers, "For the shrine," make sure you drop them into the box before dawn. Some customers don't need a receipt. They just need to be remembered long enough to keep the doors between us and them closed. At least until the next rainy night.